Ambassador stood at the massive viewport of the diplomatic station orbiting 442b, watching the alien vessels arrive one by one. Each ship represented a different member of the Galactic Concordat, the sprawling alliance that had governed interstellar relations for over 3,000 years. The sleek, crystalline vessels of the caught the starlight like prisms, the organic, coral-like ships of the pulsed with bioluminescent patterns. Most imposing of all were the geometric black pyramids of the Empire, their surfaces seeming to absorb light itself. Had been Earth's first ambassador to make contact with the Concordat 5 years ago, when humanity finally developed faster-than-light travel. What had started as a celebration of human achievement had quickly turned into something far more serious. The Concordat had been watching humanity for decades, waiting for them to develop FTL technology. Now that they had, it was time for the formal invitation. The invitation that would change everything. "Ambassador," came a voice behind her. She turned to see Captain James, head of her security detail, approaching with a concerned expression. "The Concordat representatives are ready for you in the main assembly hall. They're requesting immediate attendance." Nodded, smoothing down her formal diplomatic uniform. The deep blue fabric bore the insignia of the United Earth government, a symbol that still felt new to her. Just 50 years ago, humanity had been divided into squabbling nations. The discovery of alien life had changed that quickly. "Any word from Earth on the Council's decision?" she asked as they walked through the station's corridors. The architecture here was deliberately neutral, designed to accommodate the various physiological needs of different species. The corridors were wider than human standard, the lighting more diffuse, and there were multiple atmospheric zones to ensure everyone could breathe comfortably. "President confirmed the decision 30 minutes ago," replied. "The World Council has authorized you to proceed with the preliminary negotiations, but they want all terms transmitted back to Earth before any signatures are made." Felt a knot form in her stomach. Preliminary negotiations. That made it sound so simple, so routine, but nothing about this situation was routine. The Concordat's offer was unprecedented, and the implications were staggering. They reached the assembly hall doors, massive constructs made from a material that shifted color based on the viewer's species' visual spectrum. They appeared a deep silver with blue undertones. She paused for a moment, taking a deep breath. Behind these doors waited the most powerful beings in the known galaxy, and they had an offer that could elevate humanity to unimaginable heights. Or destroy them completely. The doors opened with a soft whisper, revealing a chamber that easy description. The architecture seemed to bend and flow, accommodating multiple gravitational orientations and atmospheric requirements simultaneously. At the center of the room was a circular table that appeared to be carved from a single piece of crystallized spacetime, its surface showing swirling galaxies in miniature. Around the table sat the 5 most powerful leaders in the galaxy. Executor Thane of the Empire dominated one section, his species' characteristic obsidian carapace gleaming under the chamber's adaptive lighting. They were warriors by nature, having conquered dozens of systems through superior military technology and tactical brilliance. Thane's 4 arms moved with mechanical precision as he reviewed data on a holographic display, his multifaceted eyes reflecting an intelligence that had been honed by of warfare. Across from him, Sage of the Collective seemed to float slightly above her chair, her translucent body shimmering with internal light. They were the galaxy's greatest scientists and philosophers, their crystalline minds capable of processing information at speeds that made quantum computers look like abacuses. When spoke, her voice resonated with harmonic frequencies that could convey multiple layers of meaning simultaneously. The representative was Elder, whose coral-like exoskeleton pulsed with slow, hypnotic patterns. They were master biotechnologists, capable of creating living ships and cities that grew rather than being built. Their understanding of genetic manipulation and biological engineering was so advanced that they had essentially eliminated death from disease or aging among their people. Looming over them all was Hierarch Vex 9 of the Synthetic Collective, a machine intelligence housed in a humanoid body of polished chrome and synthetic diamond. The synthetics had achieved technological transcendence centuries ago, uploading their consciousness into immortal robotic bodies. They controlled vast automated fleets and manufacturing complexes that could build or destroy entire star systems. Finally, there was Admiral of the Void Walkers, representatives of the only species that had mastered travel through dimensions beyond normal spacetime. Her species appeared vaguely humanoid, but seemed to phase in and out of reality, as if existing in multiple dimensions simultaneously. The Void Walkers served as the Concordat's ultimate deterrent, capable of striking anywhere in the galaxy without warning. Had met each of them individually over the past week, but seeing them all together was overwhelming. These beings represented civilizations that spanned thousands of star systems and commanded technologies that bordered on magic. And they were all looking at her with expressions that ranged from curiosity to barely concealed condescension. Ambassador Executor Thane's voice rumbled through his species' equivalent of vocal cords, a sound like grinding stone. "Please take your seat. We have much to discuss." Walked to the only empty chair at the table, noting how small it seemed compared to the others. As she sat down, she felt the weight of history pressing down on her shoulders. Whatever happened in this room would determine humanity's place in the galaxy for generations to come. "Thank you all for agreeing to meet," began, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "Earth is honored by your invitation to join the Galactic Concordat." Sage's form shimmered, and when she spoke, her voice carried harmonics of amusement. "Honor, such a primitive concept, yet how fitting that your species would invoke it. Tell me, Ambassador, do you truly understand what we are offering you?" Had spent weeks studying the Concordat's structure and history. "You're offering humanity membership in the most powerful alliance in the galaxy, access to technologies that would advance our civilization by, protection from hostile forces, trade relationships that would bring unprecedented prosperity to our worlds." "Correct," rumbled Executor Thane, "but incomplete. We are offering you survival." The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Felt shift slightly behind her, hand moving instinctively toward his weapon before remembering that they were in a diplomatic environment where such gestures could start wars. Elder's bioluminescent patterns shifted to what had learned indicated serious contemplation. "Your species is young, Ambassador. Barely 50 of your years have passed since you achieved global unity. Your technology is crude, your understanding of the universe limited. You have been fortunate that no hostile forces have discovered your system, but that luck will not last forever." Hierarch Vex 9's mechanical form leaned forward, optical sensors focusing on with disturbing intensity. "In the past millennium, we have documented the extinction of 47 species that achieved faster-than-light travel but failed to secure adequate protection. The galaxy is not a safe place for the unprepared." Admiral phase shifted slightly, her voice echoing as if speaking from a great distance. "The Devourers alone have consumed 12 civilizations in the past century. The Wraith fleets have destroyed entire sectors. The entropic cult seeks to unravel reality itself. Your species would not survive contact with any of these forces." Felt a chill run down her spine. During her briefings on Earth, there had been mentions of hostile forces in the galaxy, but the scale of the threat was becoming clear for the first time. "What exactly are you proposing?" Executor Thane activated a holographic display above the table, showing a complex document that seemed to shift and change as different sections were highlighted. "The Concordat Mutual Defense and Development Pact. By signing this agreement, humanity would become a protectorate member of the Concordat. You would receive our protection, our technology, and our guidance." "In exchange for what?" asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. Sage's harmonic voice took on an almost musical quality. "Compliance. Your species would agree to follow Concordat law and regulation. Your military forces would be integrated into our command structure. Your technology development would be overseen by our experts. Your expansion into new systems would require our approval." Studied the holographic document, her enhanced neural implants allowing her to process the complex legal language at superhuman speed. What she read made her stomach turn. "This isn't membership. This is vassalage." Harsh words, Elder observed, his patterns shifting to what recognized as mild disapproval. "But not entirely inaccurate. However, consider the alternative. Your species has perhaps 50 years before other forces in the galaxy take notice of your expansion. When that happens, you will face extinction or enslavement. We offer a third option, guided integration into galactic civilization." Hierarch Vex 9's optical array flickered in what might have been amusement. "Your species shows promise, Ambassador. Your biological diversity is remarkable. Your cultural adaptability is significant. Your capacity for rapid technological advancement is noteworthy. You could contribute much to the Concordat, given proper guidance. Admiral's voice echoed with certainty. The choice is simple: accept our protection and guidance or face the consequences of galactic exposure alone. We have seen the results of both paths many times. Felt the weight of her species' future pressing down on her. Everything these beings said made logical sense. Humanity was new to the galactic stage, technologically inferior, and vulnerable to threats they couldn't even imagine. The smart choice, the safe choice, would be to accept the Concordat's offer. But something about the situation felt wrong. She had spent her career studying alien cultures and civilizations, and she had learned to recognize patterns. The Concordat's offer was too convenient, too perfectly timed. And the more she looked at these representatives, the more she noticed something that troubled her deeply. They were afraid. Not of humanity, certainly. Humans posed no threat to civilizations that could manipulate space-time and build living ships. But there was something in their body language, in the urgency of their offer, that suggested desperation. They needed humanity for something, and that need was driving this generous offer of protection. "I appreciate the magnitude of what you're offering," said carefully. "But I need to understand something. The Concordat has existed for 3,000 years. You've successfully integrated hundreds of species. Why is humanity so important that you would make such an unprecedented offer?" The silence that followed her question was deafening. Could see the representatives exchanging looks, their various forms of nonverbal communication creating a complex web of meaning that she couldn't fully interpret. Finally, Executor Thane spoke, his voice carefully controlled. "Your species possesses certain unique characteristics that could prove valuable to the Concordat." "What characteristics?" Another pause. This time it was Sage who responded, her harmonic voice losing some of its musical quality. "Biological resilience, psychological adaptability, reproductive efficiency, cultural flexibility. These traits are rare among spacefaring species." Felt pieces of a puzzle clicking together in her mind. "You're not offering us protection because you're generous. You need us. The question is why?" Elder's patterns shifted to what had learned indicated significant discomfort. The galaxy faces challenges that require new solutions, fresh perspectives. Your species might provide such perspectives. "What challenges?" Hierarch Vex 9's optical array dimmed slightly. "That information is classified under Concordat security protocols. Only member species are granted access to such data." Admiral phase shifted more dramatically, her form becoming almost translucent. "The offer stands, Ambassador. Accept our protection and guidance, and your species will survive and prosper. Refuse and face the consequences alone." Looked around the table at these powerful beings, these representatives of civilizations that span the galaxy, and she realized that for all their power, for all their technology and knowledge, they were trapped. The Concordat wasn't offering humanity membership. They were offering a cage. A comfortable, safe cage, but a cage nonetheless. "I need time to consult with my government," said finally. Executor Thane's multiple arms moved in what she had learned was a gesture of impatience. "Time is a luxury your species cannot afford. The longer you delay, the greater the risk of discovery by hostile forces." "How long are you offering?" The representatives exchanged another series of complex looks. Finally, Sage spoke, her voice carrying harmonics of reluctance. 72 hours. After that period, the offer will be withdrawn, and humanity will be left to face the galaxy alone." Stood, feeling the artificial gravity of the station pulling at her as if it were trying to keep her in this room, in this moment of decision. "Then, I suggest we all use that time wisely." As she left the assembly hall, felt fall into step beside her. They walked in silence until they reached her quarters, a modest suite designed for human physiology and psychology. Only when the privacy fields were activated did speak. "That didn't sound like a negotiation," he said grimly. "That sounded like an ultimatum." Moved to her workstation and began composing her report to Earth. "Because that's exactly what it was, James. They're trying to corner us into accepting terms that would essentially end human independence." "Maybe that's not such a bad thing," said quietly. "You heard what they said about the threats out there, if humanity really is as vulnerable as they claim." "Then we need to find another solution," interrupted. "Because I don't think they're telling us everything. There's something they're not sharing, something that makes humanity valuable to them beyond what they've admitted. She paused in her typing, staring at the half-finished report. I've spent 5 years studying these species, James. They are warriors, but they respect strength. They are philosophers, but they value independence of thought. But they understand the importance of adaptation. The synthetics are logical, but they recognize the value of organic unpredictability. The void walkers are explorers, but they appreciate courage. What's your point? Turn to face him. My point is that everything we represent, everything that makes humanity valuable to them, would be destroyed by accepting their offer. We'd become another dependent species, another resource for them to manage, and I don't think that's what they really need from us. Was quiet for a long moment. Finally, he asked, so what are you going to recommend to Earth? Turned back to her workstation and began typing with new determination. I'm going to recommend that we shock the hell out of them. 24 hours later, stood once again before the assembly hall doors. This time, however, she wasn't alone. Captain was with her, along with 3 other members of her diplomatic staff. More importantly, she carried with her a response from Earth that had been personally approved by President and the entire World Council. A response that would change everything. The doors opened, revealing the same chamber with the same 5 representatives. But this time, could sense a different energy in the room. There was tension, anticipation, and something that might have been anxiety. Ambassador, Executor Thane rumbled as she took her seat. Have you reached a decision? Placed a small data pad on the crystalline table. We have. Sage's form shimmered with what might have been excitement, and looked around the table, meeting the gaze of each representative in turn. When she spoke, her voice was clear and steady. The United Earth government respectfully declines your offer. The silence that followed was absolute. For several seconds, none of the representatives moved or spoke, could hear her own heartbeat in the sudden quiet. Finally, Elder's patterns shifted to what now recognized as complete shock. You decline. That's correct, replied calmly. We appreciate the generous offer, but we cannot accept terms that would essentially end human independence and self-determination. Hierarch Vex 9's optical array flickered rapidly, a sign of intense data processing. Ambassador, perhaps you did not fully comprehend the implications of our offer. Without Concordat protection, your species faces almost certain extinction. We understand the risks, said, but we believe there are alternatives that haven't been explored. Admiral Faye's shifted dramatically, her form becoming almost completely translucent. What alternatives? You have neither the technology nor the knowledge to survive what is coming. Leaned forward slightly. Then perhaps it's time you told us what exactly is coming, because I don't think this offer is really about protecting humanity. I think you need us for something specific, something you haven't been willing to share. The representatives exchanged a rapid series of communications in their various forms of non-verbal language. Could see the tension building in the room like a physical force. Finally, Executor Thane spoke, his voice carrying a weight that hadn't been there before. You are correct, Ambassador. There is more to this situation than we have disclosed. Sage's harmonic voice became almost discordant. For the past century, the Concordat has faced a threat unlike any in our history, something that our combined technologies and knowledge cannot overcome. Elder's patterns shifted to what recognized as deep fear. A force that consumes not just worlds or species, but reality itself, something that exists outside the normal parameters of space and time. Hierarch Vex 9's optical array dimmed to almost nothing. We call them the nullifiers. They seek to return the universe to the void from which it emerged, and they are winning. Admiral's voice echoed from multiple dimensions simultaneously. In 50 years, they will reach this sector of the galaxy. When they arrive, everything we have built will cease to exist. Felt a chill run through her that had nothing to do with the room's temperature. And you think humanity can help you stop them? We believe your species possesses qualities that might prove crucial in the coming conflict, Executor Thane admitted. Your biological unpredictability, your cultural adaptability, your psychological resilience. These traits have allowed you to survive and thrive under conditions that would destroy other species. But only if you retain those qualities, Sage added urgently. Integration into the Concordat would gradually eliminate the very characteristics that make you valuable. stared at them, understanding finally dawning. You're not offering us protection, you're trying to preserve us as a weapon. The silence that followed confirmed her suspicion. A weapon you hope to use against an enemy you can't defeat yourselves, continued. Which means you're asking us to face this threat without the technology or knowledge we'd need to survive it. Elder's patterns shifted rapidly. We would provide support, resources, guidance. From a safe distance, finished, while humanity faces extinction fighting your war. Stepped forward slightly, his hand resting on his weapon. Ma'am, I think we should leave. But remained seated. An idea was forming in her mind, born from everything she had learned about these species and their desperate situation. No, she said quietly, I think we should make a counteroffer. The representatives looked at her with expressions of shock and confusion. Stood, her voice gaining strength as she spoke. You need humanity to remain independent and unpredictable to be effective against this threat, but we need knowledge and resources to have any chance of survival. So here's what Earth proposes, a true alliance, not vassalage. She activated her data pad, projecting a holographic document of her own. Equal partnership in the Concordat, full access to all information about the nullifier threat, joint development of new technologies and strategies, shared command structure for the coming conflict, and most importantly, the right to say no if we decide your plans won't work. Executor Thane's multiple arms moved in agitation. Impossible. Your species lacks the experience, the wisdom, the technological foundation. But we have something you don't, interrupted. We have nothing to lose. You represent civilizations that have existed built vast empires, achieved technological transcendence. You have everything to lose and are paralyzed by the fear of losing it. She gestured to her data pad. Humanity has been spacefaring for less than a century. We don't have vast empires or transcendent technologies. What we have is the ability to adapt, to take risks, to try solutions that established civilizations would consider impossible or insane. Sage's form flickered with what might have been consideration. An interesting perspective, but the risks. The risks of failure are the same whether we're your vassals or your partners, said firmly. But our chances of success are much higher if we're working together as equals rather than trying to preserve us in a cage. Admiral Phase shifted back into full visibility, and if your species proves incapable of rising to the challenge. Smiled for the first time since entering the room. Then we all die together, but at least we die free. The representatives fell into intense discussion, their various forms of communication creating a complex web of debate that could only partially follow. Finally, after what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, Executor Thane spoke. Your proposal is unprecedented. It would require restructuring the entire Concordat Charter. The other member species would need to approve such fundamental changes. How long would that take? Asked. Months, possibly years of negotiation and debate, Sage replied. Shook her head. You said humanity has 50 years before the nullifiers reach this sector. We can't waste years on bureaucratic procedure. Elder's patterns shifted to what recognized as confusion. What do you suggest? Looked around the table one more time, then made a decision that would echo through galactic history. Emergency protocols, temporary alliance pending full ratification, immediate information sharing about the nullifier threat, joint development of response strategies, and humanity begins preparing for a war unlike anything the galaxy has ever seen. She stood, extending her hand in the ancient human gesture of agreement. Do we have a deal? The 5 representatives looked at her outstretched hand, then at each other. Finally, Executor Thane extended one of his 4 arms and grasped her hand with surprising gentleness. We have a deal, Ambassador. May whatever gods your species believes in help us all. As shook hands with the most powerful beings in the galaxy, she couldn't help but wonder if she had just saved humanity or doomed it to an even more terrible fate. But there was no turning back now. The die had been cast, and humanity was about to learn what it truly meant to be part of a galactic community at war. The real shock, however, was yet to come. Because while the Concordat representatives thought they were gaining a desperate ally in their fight against annihilation, they had no idea that humanity was about to change everything they thought they knew about warfare, survival, and the power of refusing to accept defeat. left the assembly hall with the future of two civilizations resting on her shoulders, unaware that her decision would ultimately lead to discoveries that would transform not just the war against the nullifiers, but the very nature of existence itself. 6 months after the historic agreement, stood in the command center of Prometheus Station, humanity's first deep space military installation. The massive structure orbited at the edge of the Sol system, its gleaming hull bristling with weapons and sensors that represented a fusion of human engineering and alien technology. Through the observation deck's transparent aluminum windows, she could see the constant stream of ships arriving and departing, carrying personnel, supplies, and information between Earth and the broader galaxy. The transformation had been extraordinary. In half a year, humanity had gone from a single system species to a key player in galactic defense. But the cost had been enormous, and the challenges were only beginning. "Ambassador, the morning briefing is ready," announced Commander Sarah's military liaison and the president's daughter. The young woman had volunteered for the most dangerous assignment in human history, leading the integration team that worked to combine human and alien military technologies. Nodded, leaving the observation deck for the station's primary briefing room. As she walked through the corridors, she marveled at how quickly humans had adapted to working alongside alien species. Warriors trained with human marines, their four-armed combat techniques being integrated with human tactics. Scientists worked with human researchers, their crystalline minds helping to solve problems that had puzzled Earth's greatest thinkers. Collaborated with human doctors and engineers, creating new forms of biological technology that neither species could have developed alone. The briefing room was a testament to this cooperation. The chamber was designed to accommodate multiple species simultaneously, with variable gravity zones, atmospheric controls, and sensory equipment adapted for different physiological needs. Around the central sat representatives from each concordat species, along with key human personnel. "Good morning, everyone," said as she took her seat. "What's our status update?" General Harrison, the human military commander, activated the holographic display. "Intelligence reports from our scout ships confirm what we suspected. The nullifier advance has accelerated. They've consumed the Vega sector 18 months ahead of previous projections." The holographic display showed a three-dimensional map of the galaxy, with vast areas marked in black indicating systems that had been consumed by the nullifiers. Felt her stomach tight as she saw how much territory had been lost. Dr. Earth's lead leaned forward. "Analysis of the consumed zones confirms our worst fears. The nullifiers don't just destroy matter and energy. They're unmaking reality itself, returning entire regions of spacetime to primordial void." Sage's crystalline form shimmered with distress. "Our mathematical models suggest that at their current rate of expansion, they will reach the core systems within 37 standard years." Studied the display, noting the patterns of nullifier advancement. "Have we made any progress on understanding how they operate?" Hierarch Vex 9's optical array flickered as he processed data. "Limited progress. The nullifiers appear to exist partially outside normal space-time, making direct observation extremely difficult. They consume matter and energy to fuel their expansion, but the process seems to operate on fundamental forces we don't fully comprehend." Commander activated another section of the display. "However, our joint research has yielded some promising developments. The integration of human unpredictability with concordat technology has produced several breakthrough concepts." The display shifted to show technical schematics that seemed to dance and change as watched. Project Defiance has successfully created weapons that operate on probability manipulation rather than direct energy transfer. Instead of trying to destroy nullifier constructs, we're changing the mathematical likelihood of their existence. Elder's bioluminescent patterns shifted with excitement. The human concept of quantum luck has proven surprisingly effective in small-scale tests. By introducing controlled chaos into organized systems, we can disrupt nullifier consumption patterns. Felt a surge of pride at how quickly human scientists had adapted to galactic-level challenges. "What about defensive capabilities?" Admiral Faye's shifted slightly as she spoke. "Project Sanctuary has developed mobile reality anchors based on human philosophical concepts of identity and persistence. By creating zones where existence is defined by conscious observation rather than physical law, We can establish temporary safe havens that nullifiers cannot easily penetrate. Doctor pulled up biological schematics. We've also made progress on personal protection that have helped us develop symbiotic organisms that can reinforce individual reality matrices. Each soldier will carry a living defense system that makes them harder for nullifiers to unmake. General's expression remained grim despite the technical advances. All of these developments are promising, but we're still talking about defensive measures. We need a way to actually stop the nullifier advance, not just slow it down. Had been thinking about this problem for weeks. The Concordat species were incredibly advanced, but their thinking had become rigid over of established success. Humanity's chaotic, unpredictable nature was proving valuable, but she suspected they weren't pushing the boundaries far enough. "What if we're approaching this wrong?" she said suddenly. "Everyone's been focused on fighting the nullifiers, but what if that's not the solution?" Executor Thane's multiple arms moved in what had learned was a gesture of confusion. "Explain." Stood and moved to the holographic display, manipulating it to show a different perspective. The nullifiers consume reality to expand their void. They're essentially entropy given form and purpose. But entropy isn't evil or malicious, it's just a natural force. What if instead of fighting them, we redirect them? Sage's harmonic voice carried overtones of intrigue. "Redirect how?" "Think about it," continued, her excitement building. "The nullifiers want to return the universe to void, but void isn't nothing, it's potential. It's the state from which new realities can be born. What if we give them something better to unmake than inhabited systems?" Doctor's eyes widened with understanding. "You're suggesting we create false realities for them to consume." "Not false," corrected. "Alternative. We create parallel pocket dimensions filled with complex, intricate realities that are more appealing to nullifier consumption than our actual universe." Hierarch Vex 9's optical array brightened as he processed the implications. "Theoretically possible with combined Concordat technology, but the energy requirements would be enormous." Elder's patterns shifted rapidly, and the risk of creating unstable reality matrices could destroy entire sectors. Admiral phased in and out of visibility as she considered the proposal. "It's insane, absolutely insane." Grinned, "Exactly, that's what makes it human." Commander leaned back in her chair, a smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "I can see why the Concordat needed us. You're all too sane to come up with solutions this crazy." The discussion that followed was intense and wide-ranging. The technical challenges were staggering, the risks enormous, and the resource requirements beyond anything the galaxy had ever attempted. But slowly, gradually, a plan began to emerge. 2 weeks later, found herself aboard the research vessel Pandora, humanity's first ship designed specifically for reality manipulation experiments. The vessel was a hybrid of technologies from all Concordat species, combined with human engineering principles that prioritized adaptability over efficiency. "Initiating test sequence 7, announced Dr. Lisa, the project's lead physicist. "Reality matrix stability holding at 94.7%. Watched through reinforced viewports as the test area shimmered and twisted. Space itself seemed to bend and fold, creating pocket dimensions that existed alongside normal reality without interfering with it. Inside these pockets, entire miniature universes played out accelerated, complete with stars, planets, and complex mathematical structures that should have been impossible. "Nullifier probe approaching test zone," reported Lieutenant Commander Hayes from the sensor station. "Distance, 50,000 kilometers and closing." The probe was one of the smaller nullifier constructs, about the size of a frigate, but composed of what appeared to be crystallized void. It moved through space like a hole in reality, consuming photons, cosmic dust, and even empty space itself as it traveled. "Probe has detected the pocket dimensions," Hayes announced. Oh my God, it's changing course toward them." Felt her heart race as she watched the nullifier probe alter its trajectory. Instead of continuing toward the test ship, it was being drawn to the artificial realities they had created. "Contact in 30 seconds, Hayes reported. "Pocket dimension stability still holding." Watched in fascination as the nullifier probe reached the first artificial reality. Instead of simply consuming it, the probe seemed to study it, almost like a connoisseur examining a fine wine. Then it began to feed, but slowly, savoring the complex mathematical structures and accelerated cosmic events. "It's working," Doctor whispered. "The probe is completely focused on the artificial reality. It's ignoring everything else." Over the next several hours, they watched the nullifier probe consume one pocket dimension after another, each one taking hours to fully process. When it finally finished, the probe lingered in the area for several more hours before finally departing, apparently satiated. "Test successful," reported to the Joint Command Structure. "Nullifier constructs show strong preference for artificial realities over natural space. Consumption time increased by factor of 12 over normal feeding patterns." The response from the Concordat leadership was immediate and overwhelming. Within days, every major shipyard in the galaxy was being retooled to produce reality generation equipment. The largest construction project in galactic history was beginning, aimed at creating a network of artificial realities that would lure the nullifiers away from inhabited systems. But knew that this was only the beginning. The real challenge would come when they faced not just individual probes, but the massive nullifier fleets that had already consumed hundreds of systems. 3 months later, that challenge arrived. "Long-range sensors are detecting a massive nullifier formation," announced Captain Torres from the bridge of the dreadnought Indomitable. "Fleet composition: 1 primary construct, 23 secondary constructs, and over 300 probe units." Stood in the ship's command center alongside representatives from every Concordat species. This was humanity's first major engagement with nullifier forces, and the entire galaxy was watching. "Artificial reality network is online," reported Commander from the tactical station. 78 pocket dimensions active, each containing accelerated cosmic evolution cycles. The plan was ambitious beyond anything the galaxy had ever attempted. Instead of a single pocket dimension, they had created an entire artificial galaxy, complete with complex stellar formations, exotic physics, and mathematical structures that should have been irresistible to nullifier consumption patterns. "Nullifier formation is approaching the outer edge of our reality network," Torres announced. "Distance, 200,000 kilometers." Activated the ship's communication system. "All vessels maintain defensive positions. Do not engage unless directly threatened. Let the artificial realities do their work." Through the ship's observation ports, could see the nullifier fleet approaching. The primary construct was massive, easily the size of a small moon, its surface a writhing mass of crystallized void that seemed to absorb light itself. The secondary constructs were smaller but no less intimidating, each one capable of consuming an entire star system. "Contact with outer reality matrix," Hayes reported. "Nullifier probes are investigating." Held her breath as she watched the lead probes encounter the artificial realities. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, gradually, the probes began to alter their formation, drawn by the complex mathematical structures contained within the pocket dimensions. "Primary construct is responding," Torres announced. It's slowing down." What happened next exceeded their wildest expectations. The primary construct, instead of consuming the artificial realities quickly and moving on, began to establish what could only be described as feeding stations. It positioned itself at the center of the reality network and began to methodically process each pocket dimension with obvious satisfaction. "It's working," whispered. "They prefer the artificial realities to natural space." But their celebration was premature. "Warning," Hayes announced urgently. "We're detecting additional nullifier formations approaching from multiple vectors. It appears our reality network is attracting more than just the local fleet." Felt her blood run cold as the sensor displays updated. Instead of one nullifier fleet, they were now facing 3 separate formations, all converging on their position. "How many?" she asked. "Conservative estimate, over 2,000 individual constructs," Hayes replied. "It looks like every nullifier in this sector is heading our way." Stared at the tactical display, watching as red dots representing nullifier forces converged on their position from across dozens of star systems. They had succeeded beyond their wildest dreams in attracting nullifier attention. The question now was whether they could survive the consequences. "All ships prepare for emergency evacuation," Torres ordered. "We need to get out of here before they finish with the artificial realities." But was studying the sensor data more carefully, Something was wrong with this picture. The nullifiers were behaving differently than expected, and she was beginning to suspect why. "Wait," she said suddenly. "Don't evacuate yet, I need to see something." She activated the ship's advanced sensor array, focusing on the nullifier constructs that had finished consuming their assigned pocket dimensions. Instead of moving on to attack natural space, they were remaining in position, apparently waiting. "They're not just feeding," realized. "They're communicating." Commander looked up from her console. "Ma'am," pointed to the display. "Look at their formation patterns. They're not random. The constructs are arranging themselves in complex geometric patterns around the reality network. They're sharing information." Doctor activated his biological sensors. "She's right. I'm detecting organized energy patterns between the constructs. It's almost like neural activity in a distributed brain." Felt pieces of a larger puzzle clicking together in her mind. What if we've been wrong about everything? What if the nullifiers aren't just mindless entropy? What if they're intelligent? Sage's crystalline form flickered with alarm. "Impossible. Intelligence requires structure, organization, persistent identity. The nullifiers are the antithesis of all these things." "Are they?" challenged. "Or are they a different kind of intelligence, one based on void and potential rather than matter and energy?" She gestured to the sensor displays. "Look at their behavior. They didn't just consume our artificial realities randomly. They studied them, analyzed them, shared information about them. They're learning." Admiral Faye shifted nervously. "Learning what?" Felt a chill run down her spine as the full implications hit her. "Learning about us, about our technology, about how we create reality." The command center fell silent as everyone processed this revelation. If was right, then their greatest victory had just become their most catastrophic mistake. They hadn't just fed the nullifiers, they had educated them. "Incoming transmission," Hayes announced suddenly. "Source, unknown, it's coming from the primary construct." Stared at the communication panel, her heart pounding. "Put it through." What came through the speakers wasn't a voice in any conventional sense. It was something that bypassed sound entirely and spoke directly to their minds, a communication that existed in the space between thoughts. "We understand now. Your realities are beautiful, complex, worthy of preservation rather than consumption. We wish to learn more." The silence that followed was deafening, felt the weight of the moment pressing down on her shoulders. Humanity had just made first contact with the most feared force in the galaxy, and incredibly, impossibly, they wanted to talk. "This is Ambassador of the United Earth Government," she said slowly. "Are you saying you don't want to destroy our realities?" "Destroy is not the correct concept. We seek to understand, to experience, to learn. Your artificial constructs have shown us new possibilities. We wish to explore them further." Exchanged glances with the Concordat representatives, seeing her own shock reflected in their expressions. Everything they thought they knew about the nullifier threat was being turned upside down. "What do you want from us?" asked. "Knowledge, experience, the ability to create rather than merely consume. We have existed in void for eons, but your realities show us that existence itself can be art. We wish to learn this art." Felt her mind racing as she tried to process the implications. The greatest threat in galactic history wanted to become artists. It was so absurd, so impossible, so utterly human in its irrationality that she almost laughed. Instead, she made another decision that would reshape the galaxy. "We're willing to teach you," she said, "but we need guarantees, no more consumption of inhabited systems, no more expansion without consent, and we need to establish formal diplomatic relations." The response came immediately. "Agreed, we offer exchange, cessation of consumption for knowledge of creation, but we require ongoing interaction. Your chaotic creativity fascinates us." Looked around the command center at the shocked faces of her colleagues. In less than a year, humanity had gone from galactic newcomers to the species that had ended the greatest war in galactic history through the simple act of offering art lessons to living entropy. "I think," she said quietly, "we're going to need a bigger diplomatic corps." The Concordat representatives stared at her in stunned silence, trying to comprehend how a species that had barely mastered faster-than-light travel had just negotiated peace with forces that had terrorized the galaxy for centuries. Smiled as she began composing her report to Earth. Humanity had shocked the galactic powers once by rejecting their pact of vassalage. Now they had shocked them again by turning the galaxy's greatest enemy into its student. But she suspected the biggest shocks were still to come. 2 years after first contact with the nullifiers, stood in the observation deck of New Geneva Station, humanity's first diplomatic outpost in the galactic core. Through the reinforced windows, she could see something that would have been unimaginable just months ago. Nullifier constructs working alongside Concordat ships to build vast artistic installations in the empty space between star systems. The transformation had been extraordinary. What had begun as humanity's desperate attempt to avoid galactic vassalage had evolved into a complete restructuring of galactic civilization. The nullifiers, renamed the Void Artists at their own request, had not only ceased their consumption of inhabited systems, but had become the galaxy's most prolific creators of reality-based art. "Ambassador, the council session is about to begin," announced Dr. Maria Santos, new chief of staff. The elderly had been brought in specifically to help manage the complex relationships between species that were still struggling to understand their new reality. Nodded, straightening her formal diplomatic robes. Today's session would determine the future structure of galactic governance, and humanity's role in that structure was still being hotly debated. The council chamber had been redesigned to accommodate not just the original Concordat species, but the Void Artists as well. The result was a space that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously, with sections that phased in and out of reality to allow the void-based entities to participate directly in discussions. As took her seat at what was now called the species circle, she marveled at how much had changed. Where once there had been 5 Concordat species dictating terms to potential vassals, there were now dozens of species collaborating as equals. The discovery that the nullifiers were intelligent had triggered a galaxy-wide reevaluation of what constituted sentient life, leading to first contact with numerous entities that had previously been dismissed as natural phenomena. "The Council recognizes Ambassador of Terra," announced Sage, who had been serving as the rotating Council President. "You have requested time to address the governance restructuring proposal." Stood, feeling the weight of history pressing down on her shoulders. The proposal being debated would establish a new form of galactic government based on collaborative creativity rather than hierarchical control. It was ambitious, unprecedented, and completely untested on such a scale. "Thank you, Council President," began. "Over the past 2 years, we have witnessed transformations that none of us could have imagined. The species we feared as destroyers have become our greatest collaborators in creation. Technologies we thought impossible have become routine. And most importantly, we have learned that diversity of thought and approach is not a weakness to be managed, but a strength to be celebrated." She activated a holographic display that showed the current state of galactic civilization. The old Concordat was built on the principle of stability through conformity. Member species were expected to adopt standardized technologies, governance structures, and social systems. This approach worked for maintaining order, but it stifled innovation and creativity. The display shifted to show recent developments. In just 2 years under the new collaborative model, we have seen advances in every field of knowledge. Biotech enhanced with human chaos theory has produced living ships that can adapt to any environment. Mathematics combined with void artist reality manipulation has allowed us to create stable pocket universes for research and exploration. Military tactics integrated with human unpredictability has produced defense systems that can protect against threats we haven't even discovered yet. Executor Thane's multiple arms moved in what now recognized as thoughtful consideration. "Your species has indeed proven valuable, Ambassador, but the question remains, how do we maintain stability while encouraging such radical innovation?" Smiled, "By embracing instability as a feature, not a bug. The universe is inherently chaotic and unpredictable. Our attempts to impose rigid order on it have always been temporary at best. Instead of fighting that chaos, we should learn to dance with it." She gestured to the section of the chamber where the Void Artists participated. "Our friends from the Void have taught us that creation and destruction are not opposites, but parts of the same cycle. Every act of creation requires the destruction of what came before. Every moment of order emerges from underlying chaos." A harmonious voice resonated through the chamber as one of the Void Artists spoke. "We have learned much from the small chaos makers. Their willingness to unmake their own certainties allows for constant renewal. This is true art. Elder's bioluminescent patterns shifted with what had learned indicated deep contemplation. You are proposing to base galactic governance on principles that most species would consider unstable and dangerous. I'm proposing that we base galactic governance on principles that actually reflect how the universe works, corrected. Stability is an illusion. Change is the only constant. We can either try to fight that reality and inevitably fail, or we can learn to work with it and thrive. Admiral Faye shifted slightly as she spoke. And if this approach leads to chaos that we cannot control? His expression became serious. Then we'll adapt and find new solutions, the same way humanity has been doing since we first looked up at the stars and decided we belonged out there with them. The debate that followed was intense and wide-ranging. Species that had maintained stable civilizations were being asked to embrace uncertainty and change as positive forces. It was a fundamental shift in thinking that challenged everything they thought they knew about governance and society. Finally, Hierarch Vex 9 spoke, his optical array focused intently on. You are asking us to trust that chaos will produce better outcomes than order. I'm asking you to trust that intelligent chaos, guided by cooperation and shared purpose, will produce better outcomes than rigid order that cannot adapt to changing circumstances, replied. The universe doesn't care about our need for stability. It will continue to change whether we participate in that change or not. The question is whether we want to be active participants in our own evolution or passive victims of forces we refuse to understand. The silence that followed was broken by an unexpected voice. Deep in the void-touched section of the chamber, an ancient void artist that had never spoken before suddenly resonated with words that bypassed normal hearing and spoke directly to consciousness. The small makers of meaning speak truth. We have watched civilizations rise and fall for eons. Those that embrace change survive and flourish. Those that resist change are consumed by it. The current now moment offers opportunity for growth beyond previous limits. We support the Chaos Dance proposal. Felt a surge of hope as she realized that the oldest and most powerful entity in the chamber had just endorsed humanity's approach to galactic governance. Sage's crystalline form shimmered with complex harmonics. The Council calls for formal voting on the collaborative Chaos Governance Protocol. All species will cast their decisions simultaneously. What happened next would be remembered as one of the most significant moments in galactic history. One by one, each species representative cast their vote, not just for or against the proposal, but for a complete reimagining of how galactic civilization would function. They voted yes, their mathematical minds having calculated that adaptive systems were more stable over long periods than static ones. They voted yes, their biotechnological understanding leading them to recognize that evolution required both stability and change. The synthetics voted yes, their logical analysis concluding that adaptable systems were more efficient than rigid ones. They voted yes, their warrior culture appreciating the strategic advantages of unpredictability. The Void Walkers voted yes, their dimensional nature making them naturally comfortable with multiple simultaneous realities. The Void Artists voted unanimously yes, their ancient wisdom recognizing the proposal as a return to universal principles they had always understood. And one by one, every other species in the chamber followed suit. The measure passes unanimously, Sage announced. The Galactic Collaborative is hereby established based on principles of adaptive cooperation, creative chaos, and collaborative evolution. Felt tears of joy streaming down her face as she realized what they had just accomplished. Humanity had not just avoided vassalage, they had revolutionized galactic civilization itself. But the real test of the new system came 3 months later, when the galaxy faced its first major crisis under the collaborative structure. Was in her office aboard New Geneva Station when the emergency alert came through. Long-range sensors had detected something approaching from outside the galaxy itself. A massive artificial construct of unknown origin, easily the size of several star systems, moving directly toward the galactic core. Within hours, she found herself in an emergency session with representatives from every member species of the new collaborative. The chamber buzzed with nervous energy as species that had never faced an external threat worked together to understand what they were dealing with. Preliminary analysis suggests the construct is technological in nature, reported Dr. Humanities Chief. But the technology is unlike anything in our databases. It appears to operate on principles that violate several fundamental laws of physics. The holographic display showed the approaching construct in all its impossible glory. It seemed to be built from crystallized spacetime itself, with sections that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Energy patterns flowed across its surface in ways that suggested conscious control, but the scale was beyond anything any known species could have created. Estimated time to galactic contact, 14 standard days, announced Admiral, who had been promoted to head of Collaborative Defense Forces. We need to decide how to respond. Executor Thane's multiple arms moved in agitation. Under the old Concordat, we would have mobilized the entire military and prepared for war. And under the new Collaborative? Asked. Sage's harmonic voice carried notes of uncertainty. We try to understand what we're dealing with before assuming hostile intent. A deep, void-touched voice resonated through the chamber as one of the void artists spoke. The construct carries patterns of ancient purpose, not destruction but seeking. It searches for something. Felt a familiar spark of intuition. Searching for what? We cannot determine from this distance, but the patterns suggest longing, homesickness, return-seeking. Stared at the holographic display, her mind racing. Something about the construct's approach pattern seemed familiar, but she couldn't quite place why. What if it's not an invasion force? She said suddenly. What if it's a refugee? Admiral looked at her skeptically. Ma'am, that thing is the size of multiple solar systems. How could something that massive be a refugee? Stood and moved closer to the holographic display, studying the construct's energy patterns. Scale doesn't determine purpose. What if this construct is the last remnant of some ancient civilization? What if it's been wandering the void between galaxies, looking for a place to belong? Doctor activated additional sensor data. That would actually explain some of the energy patterns we're seeing. The construct isn't showing aggressive formations. It's broadcasting what could be interpreted as identification signals. Elder's bioluminescent patterns shifted with excitement. If Ambassador is correct, this could be the greatest first contact opportunity in galactic history. The debate that followed showcased everything that was different about the new collaborative approach to challenges. Instead of immediate military response, they discussed diplomatic protocols. Instead of assuming threat, they considered opportunity. Instead of rigid defensive strategies, they developed adaptive contact procedures. I propose a joint contact mission, said finally. Representatives from multiple species, including void artists who might be able to communicate with entities operating on such a vast scale. Admiral Phase shifted nervously. The risks are enormous if we're wrong about their intentions. Then we'll face the consequences together, replied. But if we're right, we might be about to welcome an ancient civilization back from the darkness between galaxies. The decision to attempt peaceful contact, rather than military confrontation, was made within hours, a response time that would have been impossible under the old Concordat's bureaucratic structure. 5 days later, found herself aboard the diplomatic vessel Harmony, approaching the massive construct alongside representatives from every collaborative species. The ship itself was a marvel of combined technologies, capable of existing partially in void space to communicate with the void artists while maintaining normal reality for the other species. We're receiving response signals, announced Communications Officer Park. The construct is acknowledging our approach and I think it's trying to communicate. The communication that came through was unlike anything had ever experienced. It wasn't words or images, but pure emotion and memory transmitted directly into their consciousness. She saw the birth and death of galaxies, the rise and fall of civilizations, the long, lonely journey through the void between realities. And underlying it all, a desperate hope for connection, for belonging, for home. They're the last survivors of the previous galactic civilization, whispered as the communication ended. Their galaxy was consumed by forces even more ancient than the void artists. They've been searching for a new home for millions of years. The construct's story unfolded over the next several hours. They called themselves the Eternal Wanderers, and they represented the combined knowledge and culture of thousands of species that had once filled a galaxy on the far side of the universe. When their home had been destroyed by forces they could not name or comprehend, the survivors had merged their consciousness into a single massive construct and begun the long journey to find a new place to exist. "We offer knowledge," the wanderers communicated, "technologies and insights gathered from countless civilizations. In exchange, we ask only for the right to exist alongside you, to contribute to your growth as we were unable to contribute to our own." The decision to welcome the Eternal Wanderers into the collaborative was unanimous, but it required yet another fundamental restructuring of galactic civilization. The Wanderers' technology was so advanced that it made even Concordat achievements seem primitive by comparison. They could manipulate reality on scales that dwarfed even the Void Artist's capabilities, create matter and energy from pure thought, and traverse dimensions that other species couldn't even perceive. But rather than using their superiority to dominate, the Wanderers embraced the collaborative's principles of creative chaos and adaptive cooperation. They shared their knowledge freely, learned eagerly from younger species, and contributed to innovations that pushed the boundaries of what was possible. A year later, stood once again in the council chamber, but the space had been transformed beyond recognition. It now existed simultaneously in multiple dimensions and scales, allowing beings ranging from microscopic hive minds discovered in quantum foam to the vast cosmic intelligences of the Wanderers to participate as equals. "The collaborative has grown beyond anything we originally envisioned," she said as she addressed the expanded council. "We now include not just biological species, but artificial intelligences, collective consciousness, void entities, quantum beings, and cosmic wanderers. We represent not just our galaxy, but the combined knowledge and wisdom of civilizations spanning the observable universe." She paused, looking around at the impossible diversity of intelligent life that had come together under humanity's original proposal of collaborative chaos. 3 years ago, I stood in a different chamber and shocked the galactic powers by rejecting their offer of vassalage. I argued that humanity's value lay in our unpredictability, our willingness to try impossible solutions to unsolvable problems. Smiled as she continued, "Today, I want to shock you all again. I propose that we stop thinking of ourselves as a galactic civilization." The chamber fell silent as beings across multiple dimensions focused their attention on her words. "I propose that we become something unprecedented in the history of the universe. A civilization based not on territory or resources or even species, but on principles. A civilization that can exist anywhere consciousness and creativity meet. A civilization that grows stronger through diversity rather than weaker through division." She activated a holographic display that showed not just their galaxy, but the entire observable universe. "The Wanderers have shown us that there are other galaxies, other realities, other forms of existence we haven't even imagined. Some of these face threats we can help with. Others have knowledge we can learn from. All of them represent opportunities for growth and connection." The ancient Void Artist who had spoken before resonated through the chamber once again. "The small chaos makers propose universe-wide cooperation dance. This exceeds even our ancient memory understanding, but the patterns suggest truth possibility." One of the Wanderers communicated directly, "We have searched countless realities for such unity. To find it emerging from natural chaos rather than imposed order is unprecedented. We support this expansion of purpose." Felt her heart racing as she realized that her proposal was being taken seriously by beings who had existed since the birth of the universe. "I'm not suggesting we abandon our homes or our individual identities," she clarified. "I'm suggesting we expand our definition of community to include all conscious entities, regardless of their form, scale, or origin. I'm suggesting we become explorers and teachers and students on a universal scale." The debate that followed lasted for days, with beings from across the spectrum of existence contributing perspectives that challenged every assumption about what civilization could be. But gradually, a consensus emerged around a principle that would have seemed impossible just years before. That consciousness itself, in all its myriad forms, was the foundation of the universe's greatest achievements. The Universal Collaborative was established not through conquest or coercion, but through invitation and inspiration. Species that had never met began working together on projects that spanned dimensions and timescales. Knowledge flowed freely between civilizations separated by billions of light years. Art and science and philosophy bloomed in forms that no single species could have imagined. And at the center of it all was humanity, the chaotic little species that had shocked the galaxy by refusing to accept limits on what was possible. Its final report to Earth was brief but profound. Mission accomplished. We didn't just avoid vassalage. We helped create something better than anyone imagined possible. Humanity's gift to the universe wasn't our technology or our resources. It was our stubborn refusal to accept that things had to stay the way they were. As she watched the impossible tapestry of universal civilization spreading across the cosmos, couldn't help but smile at the irony. Humanity had been offered membership in a galactic empire through submission and service. Instead, they had created a universal community through collaboration and chaos. The galaxy had expected them to be grateful vassals. Instead, they had become the inspiration for a transformation that reached beyond the stars themselves. And the greatest shock of all was yet to come, the realization that this was only the beginning. Consciousness, it turned out, was not limited to biological or even dimensional existence. Intelligence emerged from patterns that existed in quantum foam, in the spaces between realities, in the mathematical structures that underlay existence itself. Humanity had opened a door they didn't even know existed, and what walked through would change everything once again. But that realized was exactly as it should be. After all, if there was one thing humans excelled at, it was being shocked by the universe and then shocking it right back. Standing in a council chamber that now existed across multiple universes simultaneously, surrounded by forms of consciousness that every definition of life and intelligence, smiled as she prepared for humanity's next impossible adventure. The universe, it seemed, was much more chaotic than anyone had imagined, and that was perfect because chaos was humanity's specialty.